and welcome to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina and Rzouki, and I'm joined by my co-host Gabriele Marcotti. Hello, Gab. How are you?
Hello.
Nice to have you on. And there's so much for us to talk about.
Huge weekend.
Really,
Huge
it was
weekend.
the biggest weekend that I can remember for so long. Everything happened in Italy, everything happened in Spain, of course, the Classico, and Germany. We know who the champions are. But we will get to all that in a bit. We are starting off with, of course, the hottest game of the weekend. Barcelona versus Real Madrid. Now, Gab, I wanted to ask you, because do you think this was the perfect game by Real Madrid, or do you think that Pep Guardiola got his tactics wrong and Barcelona lost that game all by themselves?
Well, I think what struck me is Pep Guardiola has a tendency to overthink. You know, he's always, I just think it's in his personality. You know, he's always kind of looking for how can my team evolve. You know, we saw it when he added Ibrahimovic. He thought that might give him a different dimension. That didn't work out. We've seen it when he moved to that three at the back and putting Mascherano in central defense and, you know, playing Cesc as a striker and Messi back in midfield and all these things he's done over time. And we saw very clearly, I thought, over the two legs against AC Milan in the Champions League where he's trying to react. So he's not the kind of manager, I think, who goes out and says, this is the way we play, you come and worry about us, the way perhaps Arsene Wenger might. And I thought in this one, he completely overthought it. Partly, of course, he was resting players ahead of the Champions League.
Yeah, Chelsea.
But, you know, Real Madrid were there. You win that game, you're 1 point behind and anything can happen. And I thought he made a series of decisions which, you know, with hindsight, were wrong. Teo, you know, yeah, he can score goals, but if you play Teo, you can't have him sit all the way wide like that. You know, you might as well play Cuenca.
But do you not think that he thought that what they're going to try to do is congest the middle, like every other team that's faced Barcelona is trying to do recently with Milan and Chelsea, and thought, I'm going to have Teo try to stretch them out so that Messi can have a game to go through? That's
fine, but then you don't use Teo for that. You use Cuenca for that if you want to go there.
Teo scores goals.
This is Teo's third ever start in the Liga.
Sorry, I just use my personal.
And it's, you know, it's against Real Madrid.
I understand. It's quite a big game for
the dropping of Piqué, and we're going to be joined by Tim Stannard later. I want to find out what the deal is. There's just so much speculation of what's going on. To me, it was insane to drop him against Chelsea, and it was insane to drop him in this game. But
he's not concentrated, yeah.
But what's interesting, though, I think, is for a Guardiola who overthinks and tinkers and changes everything, you have a Mourinho who, in the previous 10 encounters, and remember, he's played him 10 times with Real Madrid. He's never beaten him in the 90 minutes. He only had that one win in the Copa del Rey. He's tried everything different every time. He's gone defensive, he's gone attacking, he's gone physical, long ball, keep possession. Nothing's worked. Here, he played what, except maybe Contrao for Arbeloa, was, most would agree, is probably his best 11. He played the style they've been playing most of the year, that sort of 4-2-3-1. Yeah. Counter-attacking, but also, you know, attacking players on the pitch, so that when you do counter, you know, you're getting attacking players to defend. And he kind of said, look, this is who we are, this is what we do, you know, deal with it. And,
that
worked.
True to his philosophy, basically.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it's his philosophy, it's a philosophy that he's used this year.
Yes, sure.
But yeah, and that was extraordinarily effective.
You see, my issue with it is that as much as I thought that Real Madrid played a brilliant game in the sense that I do think they've stuck by what they've been doing this year and thought, we're not going to actually change who we are because it's Barcelona, we're just going to play as we play. What I thought about it is Guardiola nullified the two players that offer a vertical edge to a largely horizontal team. So, you know, when you have Dani Alves starting from an attacking point, then you're missing out on his great runs, you know, to get there, the vertical edge that he adds. With Messi having to go back deep to get the ball, again, what you're making them do is go horizontal, and you have no vertical edge that plays a direct football. And then with Teo out wide, no one in the centre, and on top of it, Teo and Alves, no one is actually, you know, roaming where they needed maybe more of a horizontal edge was at the top.
I think that's a great point that you make. You know, having Dani Alves so high up the pitch to start with makes sense. I think what would have made sense if Marcelo had played on the other end, on the other side, because you're, you know, defending him. Contrao, on the other hand, is, you know, basically the world's most expensive hatchet man. So, you know, I mean, not hatchet man in the sense he's dirty, but like, you know, he is, you know, he's Mr. Hard Hat. You know, he's basically, you know, a blonde Arbeloa, right?
Yes.
So, at that point, you're right. There was no point in having Dani Alves in that role, and also it's true about having people in the box, having a center forward. Once you have, you know, you had situations where Teo was staying so wide, Iniesta in the front
That
three
was it,
works.
no runners from the midfield.
No runners. In fact, you had the opposite. You had Messi retreating into midfield to get the ball.
Yeah, and just this overflowing midfield, all going horizontally, no one running to get the ball or trying to act or exploit the space that's left behind with Messi trying to drag all the midfielders away. And you know what I don't understand is that this is a Real Madrid team with, in my opinion, not such a great defence. I mean, they're easily pulled out of position. They are susceptible to, you know, free kicks and to all of this, as we've seen by Santi Cazorla, etc. So I feel like Barcelona could have done so much more to win this. But could you say that this is the end of an era? Or this is just people are like, you know how people are always saying, oh, Real Madrid have like finally managed and this could mean the end of Barcelona and that's what's being talked about. But do you think that this is just the emergence of a great Real Madrid? Or do you think that Barcelona are just a bit tired after winning so much?
I don't think it's the emergence of a great Real Madrid, because Real Madrid have been there all along. You know, it's not Real Madrid's fault they were up against this phenomenal team. And I think Barcelona are still a great side, and I think Real Madrid are also a great side.
The emergence of a great dynasty.
I mean, yeah, you look at it on paper, and there's all these young players there, and whatever. You know, Real Madrid are a very young team. Let's not forget.
So
on the other hand, you know, you've got a manager who I think has got major issues in terms of interpersonal relations.
Yeah.
You've got a manager whose people frequently, you know, tell us, no, he's going to leave, no, he's going to stay, and whatever, and who I think, you know, does a lot of his best work when he's under a certain type of creative tension. You know, can he maintain it next season? I don't know. I mean, I think that there are. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens with Real Madrid as a team, because in terms of a group of talented young superstars, and this is a young team. Xabi Alonso maybe is the one you think about going forward, possibly Casillas in a couple of years. I mean, this is a pretty exceptional group.
A very exceptional squad. We'd like to welcome Tim Stannard, known as La Liga Loca from 442. Hello, Tim. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much.
Okay, so the biggest game of the season. What does this tell us about Barcelona going forward?
I don't think it tells you a huge amount. If you had the fully fit Barcelona 11, let's say of last year, the front three, Messi, Villa, Pedro, Iniesta playing well, Xavi Hernandez playing as well as he can, PK on form, then it might have been a very different result. So I think what we saw, without taking anything away from a very, very solid Real Madrid performance, as we were talking about earlier, is just Mourinho played his best 11 without messing with the formation, too many surprises. But it was Barcelona a little bit off their game, suffering from injuries, suffering from tiredness. However, you can't take away anything from Real Madrid. But I really don't think it means anything as to an end of a cycle, as they see here in Spain, or an end of generation in Barcelona. I think what we're seeing is Real Madrid have caught up with Barcelona and are at that level. I don't think it means Barcelona are in decline by any means at all.
Now, if you were a hardcore culé Barcelona supporter, you might point out that the first goal came because Puyol didn't just clear it and kind of thought he was Beckenbauer or somebody, and that also the two sort of clearest cut chances that weren't converted fell to Xavi and Teo, and they both missed them, and so it wasn't a case of Barcelona being outplayed. Now, is that just the kind of crazy Barcelona Blaugrana thinking that drives Mourinho supporters insane, or is there some merit to that?
Well, Barcelona, to be fair, have taken this one on the chin. One of the most refreshing things about the match is that it was a really good contest between two of the best teams in the world. There wasn't any of the nastiness that was there before, the polemic, the arguments, the discussions. When you look at the Barcelona press, even the most hardcore, they've said, well, we didn't score enough goals, and Real Madrid defended well and took their chances. So, of course, goals can change a game. And one person maybe who's not really been mentioned, I think, coming out of this game, if people have spoken about Cristiano Ronaldo, I thought Iker Casillas was at his best, especially that chance he stopped from Xavi Hernandez. The actual referee went out for a goal kick, but he just pushed up for a corner, and one from Dani Alves as well. I thought he was very cool and calm and collected in that one, and maybe set the tone for Real Madrid.
I wanted to ask you that you brought up Ronaldo. Also, I thought Xabi Alonso had a brilliant game. But I wanted to speak about Ronaldo now. He has scored third time in a row in the Camp Nou and scored 4 out of the 5 Clásicos. Whereas Messi is struggling. I believe he has failed to score in the last 4. what does that say about? I don't want to have discussion about Messi and Ronaldo and who's better or not. But I want to point out, does that mean that Ronaldo is now a big team player? Because he's constantly being told. And when I wrote on Twitter, oh, are you sure that he's still a small team player? People said, well, where was he when it was against Bayern Munich? Is that fair to say, or do you think that he is a player that can manage it in the big games?
He always has been. I think it's just very easy to pick on him. For Real Madrid, he won the Copa del Rey final with that header. The only other time Real Madrid had beaten Barcelona, of course, they failed in 90 minutes before that. He's been carrying through the league campaign a lot of times when they've been struggling. Those goals against Atletico Madrid, the goal against Sporting, and scoring in the Camp Nou. It's just that often in Champions League semi-finals and the big games, the big players, of course, get marked out of existence, you could say, and this is the chance for the other players to come into it. But on this particular occasion, there was an awful lot of space given to Cristiano Ronaldo for that goal on the counter-attack, and he took advantage. But yes, he has been called a flat-track bully in the past because of that perhaps Pichichi record in Spain, which was something like 15 goals in the last 4 or 5 games, but he's been the driving force behind Real Madrid's season. But it was an all-round team performance in that game.
Tim, we'd be remiss if we didn't address the question I think is in a lot of people's minds. What's up with Gerard Piqué? 4th game in a row that he doesn't start. I certainly was very surprised not to see him against Chelsea and Didier Drogba in the Champions League last week. Is it a physical thing, or are some of these rumors to be believed? Well, sounds like I guess we're gonna try to get him back. Mina, you have your ear pretty close to the ground. Any spurious rumors you want to pass on about Gerard Piqué?
Well, I think from what I understand it's partly to do with his relationship. It's partly to do with the fact that his focus doesn't...
His relationship with...
Shakira. Not Ibra, so many people like to say on Twitter. I think that it looks like, with his car being parked and then the side door being swept away by a bus on a bus lane or something like that, that it just seems to me that his mind is elsewhere. And for Guardiola, he likes to create this little bubble where you live and you breathe and you eat football. I mean, Ibra even noted that in his autobiography, and that maybe that they're just worried. Well, then he's worried that at the moment with Piqué, he's the rising star. He's the Beckham of Barcelona. He's the Beckham of Spain at the moment. That he's getting carried away and not focusing on football, despite the fact, although they actually did say that he is the future of Barcelona. The club has come forth to be like, this is our future captain, and we stand beside him. But it seems to be that Guardiola at the moment just thinks he's too distracted. Well,
it seems extraordinary, but in some ways, I guess it's a reminder that footballers have private lives as well, and they can be affected by those things too. But Tim's back. We got Mina's view. Tim, Mina is suggesting that part of Piqué's issues have to do with the poor guy being brokenhearted. What's your thinking? Is that what it is?
It's hard to tell, really, but his form just simply hasn't been good enough on a basic. He was responsible for that defeat against Osasuna, a terrible display. To tell the truth, he's not looked as fit as you could say in previous games, not as sharp, not as fast. With Pep Guardiola, he's a very instinctive manager. If you lose that, what he calls the feeling, he uses that word in English with him, then your history. It happened with players like Deco, Ronaldinho, Eto'o, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, and I'm not sure that Piqué is going to be next. I think it might just be a bad season for him, but he's certainly out of favour with Pep Guardiola. And it does show an interesting aspect of his character, because Pep Guardiola is in public a very friendly, very jovial, very open manager. Yeah, deep down he's as tough as they get. He really is. He can be ruthless. He's got this figurehead World Cup winning Catalan, you could say, and he's quite happy to see him left on the bench for these very big games because he just doesn't rate him at the moment.
It's kind of brutal there, but Tim, let's turn back to the special one, of course. Because not that long ago, back in February, journalists very, very close to him had said, nope, he's decided he's leaving. What team will he choose? Because, of course, he's a special one. He can choose whatever team he wants and so on. Now it looks like it's being turned 180 degrees. There's talk of a new contract. Can you elaborate and explain? Of course, I mean, some of us were very doubtful about those stories. I think you were as well back in February, but they did come from people who are, effectively his spokespeople.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, yeah, Well, these were very strong stories, weren't they, put through in the press? But first of all, to say here in Madrid, we're desperate for Mourinho to come back talking to us because Aitor Karanka is boring us to death at the moment. He just looks utterly miserable every time he turns up there. And the press conferences last about 1 or 2 questions. They used to be like, "Where's Mourinho?" And it's like now he's done 50 of them. People have given up on it. It's anyone's guess at the moment. There's 2 ways you can look at it. Maybe Jose Mourinho, now that the league is in the bag and they're doing well in the Champions League, let's see what happens, will be quite happy to continue the project, or it's very nearly mission accomplished, job done, I've done my part of the bargain, I'm really not enjoying my life here in La Liga, I'm out of here. Again, having successfully turned Real Madrid around into one of the best teams in the world when they weren't exactly before, but they were getting knocked out by Alcorcon, they were nowhere in the Champions League, and they were very much out of the big game, out of the bright lights, and Jose Mourinho is just 1 step away, 2 steps away maybe from completing his mission, and you've got to think, what motivation will he have to stay there when we know what he's like? He stays 2 or 3 seasons and he's out of there before people get too bored of him.
Right, okay, well, sadly, that is all we have time for. I mean, just a quick question. Is Mourinho ever going to come back to speak? Or when is he going to come speak?
I don't think he's going to come back to speak again in the league. Maybe when they win the league title he will, but I think we're going to have Aitor Karanka for the next month or so, but he has to talk in the Champions League where he's obliged to do that, but those questions are so controlled there's no point asking anything interesting during them.
Oh, well, we do really miss Mourinho's...
Tell you what, Mina, though, if you miss Mourinho, remember, you can always follow on Twitter Mourinho's official spokesman, Eladio Parames, at Real Eladio.
He's
laugh.
the maddest thing you'll ever read.
Did you hear what he said about Robin? Sorry.
No.
He was talking about Robin not having that mentality.
What did he say?
He said, "Oh, the reason why Mourinho doesn't like Robin is I'm not now. You're making me doubt whether or not it was him.
Let's go check it out. But I mean, basically, it sounds like a parody account, but Eladio Parames is a real person. I've met him. I've spoken to him years ago when Mourinho came to Chelsea. He is real. He basically, I think, says a lot of the things that Mourinho perhaps
thinking, but can't
thinks
really say.
or wants people to think that he's thinking.
Okay, well, that's sadly all we have time for on Spain. Thank you so much, Tim. We'll, of course, be checking back with you next week. But we are going to be moving on to Italy after the break, so we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Ciao.
Welcome back from Spain over to Serie A, where Mina, I'm sure, you notice how festive Mina is looking today. A lot of it has to do with, of course, events this weekend with Juventus whooping Roma 4-0, laying the smackdown, I think, as some of my heroes might say it. And this was after Milan, of course, held to a 1-1 draw by Bologna the same day. So it's now a 3-point lead, and it's a nice-looking run-in. But we're going to get to Juve in a bit, and we're going to start on a bizarre and I don't even know how to describe it. Absurd, grotesque, perhaps, note.
Shameful, if you want to take me.
Shameful, yeah. No, I mean, shameful. I don't see it as shameful necessarily.
No, I don't. But those are the words used by Petrucci, head of CONI. Yeah.
I don't think it's something that we're going to see again. But long and short of it is, Genoa have been in free fall for the last couple of months or so. They're playing at home against Siena. Genoa's fans had already warned the players that they wanted more effort out of them. In what was clearly, I think, prearranged early in the second half with Genoa down 4-0 by that point.
Siena, battling relegation.
That's right. Some 60 to 80 Genoa fans, pretty hardcore types. They left their post and they sort of went around. They basically broke into the main stand, the stand right behind the tunnel. Their presence effectively drove out the people who were there, a lot of families and things like that. And they set off a couple flares, and they said that they were angry with the Genoa players, so they wanted to talk to them.
Well, they
got the match suspended, and their point was that the Genoa players weren't putting in enough effort. They weren't fit to wear the shirt, and they wanted them to take their shirts off. Now, this is grotesque. This is completely absurd. The Genoa players, after some discussion, those watching on television were left with the sight of Marco Rossi, the Genoa captain, taking his shirt off, going around to a bunch of his teammates, collecting other shirts. walking around with this bizarre-looking stack of shirts, like he picked up his dry cleaning or something.
Mesto was in floods of tears.
That's right. 2 Genoa players, it should be said, absolutely refused to take part in this nonsense. One of them was the goalkeeper, Sebastian Frey, one of my favorite guys in the world as well, who kept beating his chest and says, "Come take the shirt off me."
That was a sublime move.
And but the other one, of course, Giuseppe Sculli, who the Genoa striker, who went over. He's got a long-standing relationship with the ultras. Just talked to them and basically talked them out of it, saying like, "No, why should I take my shirt off?
I'm not going to take off my shirt. I have nothing to be ashamed of.
I have nothing to be ashamed of." Eventually, the players all put their shirts back on. The match restarted after a delay of about 40 minutes. And Genoa went on to lose 4-1, and then they sacked their manager, Alberto
They did get that one, which was an own goal from Siena.
But I think the long and short of it is what we've seen, Mina, is a situation where a bunch of fans, and I'm never going to criticize fans' right to protest, but they basically held the game hostage. They ruined and spoiled the day for the other fans who were there, who were peaceful, and had every right to go there and watch the match.
Yes.
And I hope they come down, like a ton of bricks on these people, because frankly, I could see them on my television. And the same way I can see them, I would expect the police and the authorities could see them as well.
They are. I mean, from what I checked just sort of like 10 minutes ago, is that they were going through the pictures to identify the key men, and they are going to ban them from the stadium and from other stadiums, so that not to let them watch these, watch any match anymore as a sign of punishment. It was very grotesque, and I thought that the way that they went about it was embarrassing, and I thought that if the game wasn't played, then they would have been deducted points. They would be in further trouble than they are now. They're not thinking long-term strategy. This is not the right way to protest. Having said that, I think that the way that the media and certain people and certain men have come out to speak about it, the FIGC president and CONI president, who are like, "Oh, this is such a shameful disaster," like this is putting like Italian football on such a, it's putting it further down the hill, or whatever you like to call it. I thought that was a bit much. I think
it's difficult to explain though to, I think, people watching two things. One is Marco Rossi's behavior, the captain of the team, basically saying like, "Oh, I am such a wuss that I'm going to do what these people tell me," despite the fact that they're 50 yards away.
Look, I know that you think he's practically a wimp, yeah, but you feel sorry for him at this stage.
No, I don't. I don't. Be a man.
Yeah, you respect
Be a man.
Scully. I understand that you would respect the likes of Scully, and everyone said, "Well done for him to have gone up and been like, I'm not going to take this shirt off my back," yeah. But this is the captain of Genoa. He probably felt that there was no way out.
What, and he goes
until
and
to negotiate with terrorists, basically.
If Genoa were run by a serious person and not by Enrico Preziosi, I would immediately say Marco Rossi will never play for this club ever again. But the other thing too, which is difficult to explain,
they did call it sacrilege.
How do 60 to 80 people, because that's what it was, there's cops there, there's police there. I don't understand that the stadium in Genoa, Manassi, is right in town.
In the middle of
While
town,
this is going on, there were cops there. I would have thought, and apparently the reason the cops didn't intervene straight away is they didn't want to create a ruckus and a fight, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's fine. So then just bring a bunch of people, bring a bunch of cop cars outside the stadium and pick these guys up as they come out.
Okay, but it's important to note that these guys weren't threatening these people, weren't threatening the players' lives. They were protesting, they were angry. But I think in the middle of all of this, and they're calling this a shameful act, you've forgotten a lot of things. Hardly anyone mentioned the fact that Cesena football fans did exactly the same during their training session, throwing flares onto the pitch, aiming all of that.
It's a training session.
Fine,
There's no paying customers.
What happened with this is it was in front of the entire world. Meanwhile, we're forgetting other things, such as the Lazio fans chanting anti-Semitic comments during their match against Lecce. Like Italian football.
What does that have to do with anything?
No, I'm telling you, Italian football, I think it's quite hypocritical when they're sitting there coming down so harsh on this, when as a general rule, you're talking about the ultras and fans. There is so much for them to be ashamed of, and they should be talking about this in general.
Ultras. I think it's
and
important it's important to make this distinction, because you're talking about
we're talking about ultras. We're not talking about fans over here.
No, but we're talking about some ultras. The vast majority of ultras, I think, are definitely a positive force in Italian football.
Well, either stamp them out completely or accept that they come with this kind of thing. When you give any portion of supporters, whether they are ultras or just regular fans or whatever you want, this much control, and then you sit there and you give them, free parking and amazing free tickets half the time. You treat them like they're kings. They have so much chance to do whatever they want. And then they are going to one day go against you when something like this happens. You accept the good or the bad. Before that game, they were talking about how wonderful the choreography was. And then, you know, I can see actually Tancredi on there, like, yelling at me. But I think my point is hypocritical when we're not coming down and stamping out racism, anti-Semitism, you know, things mentioned. This is a bad thing about football, but this is not the only thing that was bad that happened over the weekend.
I personally think this was unprecedented, and I think this in some ways was more serious because this is football basically giving in, or we went very close to it.
In.
Well, you know, he is the captain of the team. But do we have Tancredi?
Yes,
Tancredi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfectly, Gab.
All right, Tancredi, now, first of all, I know you were listening in. What's the situation? What's the latest? Have arrests been made? Have people been identified? And also, is anybody talking about taking action against Marco Rossi, or are we all just feeling sorry for him?
Well, first of all, 10 people so far have been identified by the police, has been said today. This doesn't mean that they have already been caught, already been arrested, or whatever. They have been identified, and that it's a point I want to come back later. You asked me about Marco Rossi, but I have to actually correct one thing you both were talking about before, because yesterday night there was let's say a story in the story between who said what to who about who had to take off the shirts. At first, the Geno's president, Enrico Preziosi, said, we were told to do that, so the order could be under control. Then there was the Questore, that is the kind of chief of police there in the city, that said, we didn't give that order at all to the team. We were supporting the people all the time. We were there on the pitch. And then, later today, this morning, the president of Genoa actually admitted that taking off the shirts was actually the best action to do in that moment, in order that nothing more dangerous would happen. So actually it's been clarified. Even if we are talking about Marco Rossi, and honestly, as a captain, I would feel ashamed. But it was the president of the club, it was Preziosi, the president of Genoa, that said, okay guys, let's take off the shirts.
All right, Tancredi, as far as the Genoa president concerned, his name is Enrico Preziosi, and I have numerous court injunctions against me, preventing me from discussing this guy, because I think he is one of the cancers of Italian football. You can go and Google him, see what a fine job he did at Como, see what a fine job he did in the famous Genoa-Venezia game when he got his team relegated for attempted match fixing.
Talk about actions against you, so goodbye, guys.
Exactly, yeah, no, I know he's a close family friend of yours, Tancredi. But let's move on from this nonsense to something very joyous for people like Mina, people who are infected with that Juventina disease. But
Gabriele, just half a minute before we move there.
Okay.
Just want to say one thing. It's not about presidents or whatever, because really tens, if not hundreds of people asking me why these things are happening, why it's not possible to stop. Everyone asking me, where was police? And I was showing them, look, there are some 10 policemen there on the pitch. Until in Italy, we will not have a straight consequence between act, crime and punishment, until that normal chain, that normal link will not have its normal way, its normal stream, well, this thing will happen. Why in England would be never possible that some fans would climb on the roof of the tunnel, because the police would arrive there, taking them, bringing them to justice, and the day after they would be sentenced. So, just wanted to say this point.
No, go on.
No problem, Tancredi. Obviously, there's different rules and different policing, and that's a debate probably for a different time. But Mina's getting very antsy because we're not celebrating Juventus' 4-0 win.
Yes,
Mina,
exactly.
take it away.
Can I just say that was a 4-0 victory over Roma, which everyone thought would be the banana skin for them. And I was like,
I certainly did.
You did, right?
Magica, of course.
Everyone was saying, oh, Juventus' run is so hard, Milan's is so much easier by comparison, and I kept writing and I kept tweeting and I thought everything that I could. Juventus perform in the big games. It's the smaller teams, they don't know how to pierce. So for me, throw in the big games as much as possible. They'll find a way because they have space to play their game, which they did yesterday. I mean, that match was over in 77 minutes, really. I was kind of bored afterwards. I felt sorry for Stecklenburg because I did not think that that was a red card. It was a penalty for sure. Second penalty ever for Juventus. Not ever, rather
Never
just
a
this
penalty.
season.
Right.
It was a you're
Never
trying
a
to say it's not a penalty?
No, no. The guy just let faint his leg on Stekelenburg.
That was a penalty in whatever way you
Guys.
try to say.
Guys, the point is, even without that, Juve won. It's a 3-point lead. What I need to get from you,
doesn't make any difference.
what I need to get from you, Tancredi, is, did they basically win the title here, looking at the run-in and looking at how demoralized and frankly crummy Milan were at home against Bologna?
Well, the thing is, guys, it is to, well, and you know, because me, and then also there was Gabriele, until weeks ago when Juventus was still under Milan, some 4 points were saying, Juve will do it, Juve will do it. I was with that since November when there was Napoli-Juventus, so for sure I will not be now the one saying, oh, it's not that sure. Still, yesterday I compared the calendars, and in the next 3 games, Juve is playing the 3 bottom teams. That this means that actually none of them are able to give, as the roster, as their quality, some real problem to Juventus. Still, Juventus is in the position to be in each game the one that will sentence them to relegation. So in some way, anyway, for them will be crucial. Will not be, okay, we are waiting here for the relegation and then we'll see. It will be a bit crucial for them. So I still stick 101% with Juventus. But anyway, it's not that sad. They still some points, even if after what we saw yesterday, Milan against Bologna, nothing new, nothing
But this
as a
is
surprise.
very much the work of Stefano Pioli. I feel like he's been absolutely marvellous against the big teams, and he was stifled Juventus very well, and now he's done it with Milan.
We were talking about big teams, but now let's go back to Milan. We were saying, I mean, in the last months, they haven't played honestly as someone that is fighting for the title. Yesterday was just another demonstration of that. Nothing new in that way. They've been unlucky, okay, because one goal to Ibrahimovic was disallowed again. Something where goal line technology would be so useful. But honestly, sometimes there are moments in which
Tancredi,
the luck is long. Yeah.
Tancredi, I'm sorry, but we've run out of time because of Mina's earlier rant. Thank you so much. That's
You gave me the floor.
That's Tancredi Palmeri. Nice to see you also praising Pioli at Bologna. Maybe he can replace Conte next season when he takes his vacation.
Not, but he's a Trapattoni boy, so he knows how to grind out big wins.
That's great how Mina didn't catch that reference to Conte's enforced vacation. We might talk about that next week, depending how things work out. We're going to be back with the Bundesliga. Hallo, und wir haben neue Meister in die Bundesliga. Mina, sorry, that was just me showing off. But we're going over to Germany, where Borussia Dortmund have repeated as Bundesliga champions. And Mina, I personally am fascinated with this story because last season they had an average age under 23 among the 10 outfield players. This whole team was sort of put together on a shoestring. Nobody made more than, I think, $2 million a year. And they sort of blitzed everybody, played at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But then you look at the prospects for this season, and there was a lot of reason to think that it wasn't going to work out because the Bundesliga Player of the Year, the heartbeat of the team, Nuri Sahin, of course, moved to Real Madrid. Lucas Barrios, who was a top scorer last year, he was exhausted from the Copa America, came back late. Shinji Kagawa, of course, he was out for 6 months.
Yeah.
And yet they go back and they have a few hiccups, and boom, then all of a sudden, just when you thought they might tail off because Klopp's style of football is so exhausting, they go on this insane run. They do it without Mario Götze, supposedly their best player. I mean, remarkable.
I think what's remarkable is, like you said, how they managed to do this despite missing the key men that took them to the title last season. And the way that they've just done their substitutions and developed them, like, for me, like Gundogan, who, came in to try to replace Sahin.
And it was terrible at the start of the season.
Absolutely
so bad.
terrible, and then in this last month or last 5 weeks, he's been, in my opinion, so developed, so clever, with a great reading of the ball, without Mario Götze, without Luka Baric and then Lewandowski, who's been absolutely brilliant, that I'm almost want to take him with me to Italy just because I think he's brilliant, you know, a great classical finisher. But it's that heartbeat of the team, you know. They are so collective, they are so hardworking, you know. It reminds me of little Juventus in Italy over there, you know. And
yeah, just like Juventus, all those young players and.
They are young, anyway, but that's not it. But, you know, it is a side that has done so well with substitutions, you know, bringing that in. And you've got to say, Klopp, wow. Wow,
Yeah.
and the fact that he's there for another 4 seasons, probably,
Well,
or he's at least, you know, tied into a contract that will last another 4 seasons.
Well, we're joined now by James Thurgood from Bundesliga.com. James, you heard Mina there. She put it so eloquently. Klopp, wow. Now, because I like the whole sort of general management side, I'm going to add my own Zork, wow. In honor to Michael. But is winning the title this year a bigger feat than winning it last season, considering also how Bayern, of course, spent a lot of money and got a lot stronger this year?
Yeah, I think it certainly is. I mean, the 2 seasons are slightly similar in the fact that they've actually won the title 2 match days early this season, like they did last season. But last season they had that tremendous lead at the beginning, and, you know, almost ran away with it and looked uncatchable completely. Whereas this season they had a poor start. They dropped some points early on when people thought they were going to be strong. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Gab, when you mentioned Sahin there. That was them getting used to not having that key player that they had all of last season. And so that transition took place, and all of a sudden the team spirit that was there last season obviously was still flowing through the team. They got themselves together. They got a great string of results. I mean, 26 games unbeaten is an incredible run of form. And it's taken them to the title. And as you mentioned so many names there, and these are all players that have stepped up this season. Błaszczykowski was one that wasn't mentioned there that I think is worth mentioning, because in the absence of Götze, he's come to the forefront really on the right-hand side and led them to victory on a couple of occasions, which was pivotal. And really Gundogan was the other one. He's turned into a key player in the last couple of weeks. And really for that last push for the title, he proved pivotal. And so for me, really, it's just a case of everyone stepped up at Dortmund, including Jurgen Klopp, including Michael Zorc, and really it was a collective effort that's led them to that 2nd consecutive title.
Now, I was wondering, because one of the things that strikes me about the way they play, James, is they play with, certainly last season, but I think this season as well, they play with such an intensity where, you know, a Bender in midfield looks as if, you know, there's 2 of them, and of course there are 2 of them in real life because he has a twin brother who plays for Bayer Leverkusen, but just one of them plays for Borussia Dortmund. And I was always wondering, you know, sometimes when a manager asks players to run themselves into the ground, you know, they do it in the first season, and then there's almost like a natural sort of second season let off. It's difficult to regain that same intensity. Partly it's mental, and partly it's also physical because it is so demanding. Can you talk a bit about how Klopp has done it, and also some of the adjustments he's necessarily made to his side, you know, in sometimes going with the 2 holding midfielders, and of course also losing Götze later in the season?
Well, for me, it really comes down, and I think I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, it's Klopp's personality. And we were talking about it in that sense of how he was bitter or disappointed or even celebrating after the 4-4 result against Stuttgart. Now, for me, his personality then filters through into how he manages his team. And really, I think there's so much respect in this young squad for what Jurgen Klopp has achieved with them and the way he's taught them about football and the way he's really moulded this Dortmund team into a title-winning side. And for me, that's why it kept going that 2nd season. That's why they kept running. That's why they kept all really fighting for that title and fighting to be in the first team. Because there's a fair amount of competition in that squad. You know, people won't look at it as a world-class or a world-beating squad, but really in the Bundesliga, by their standards, the depth they had with the likes of Perisic and Błaszczykowski on the bench at the beginning, you know, those types of players were always competing, and that competitive spirit filtered from Klopp down through the team and ultimately into their title-winning performances. And the Götze one, really, it's so interesting to see because, as you said, Sahin, they lost their key player from last season. Then everyone's touting the fact that really it's all resting on Götze's shoulders. He then misses the second half of the season, but he's almost been a forgotten man in a way because no one's really talked about Dortmund missing him. As I say, 26 games unbeaten. And for a big chunk of that, Götze was not around. And so for me, as I say, it's the players that have stepped up, but they've stepped up because they believe in what Klopp's doing, they believe in his philosophy, and really they have then exploited their opponent's weaknesses and really taken their full advantage of what they're very capable of doing.
You see, I think it's also the fact that, I mean, their defence is absolutely outstanding, 23 goals conceded. I also want to say that this is going to be a team that possibly can eclipse, you know, the 98-99 Bayern Munich team that had won with 78 points. Now, they only need to win and a draw, really, and that will be enough for them to be better than that. Now, the fact that Klopp will probably be there for another 4 years, the fact that the entire team is, well, not the entire team, most of the team is very young and can last the distance, the fact that Marco Reus is going to join them over the summer, is this, oh, and then of course there's a 2.5 million TV Sky contract that will bring in so much money starting from the 2013-14, what, that's 40 million per club? Do you think that this is a dynasty and that Borussia Dortmund are going to be the next big giant to constantly be arguing or, you know, fighting for a chance with Bayern Munich?
Well, that's it. The power shift right now looks like it might be ready to take place to a certain extent. Bayern are always going to be a really good team, and, you know, maybe Dortmund and Bayern are going to duke it out for, you know, the next 10 seasons potentially, or maybe less than that. But at the same time, Dortmund, they've come on leaps and bounds, and we all talk about the financial restraints they had and the fact that they were in debt, you know, not so long ago, really. But the fact is, their performances on the pitch are right now what's winning them that battle, and you can see it from the fact that the likes of Uli Hoeneß are getting rattled. They're making statements in the press, you know, trying to play the mind games. But on the pitch, Dortmund got their business done against Bayern, especially twice this season, and obviously they've gone on an unbeaten run against Bayern Munich now for the last couple of matches, and you look to the DFB Pokal final, which is coming up, you know, early May, and you're thinking already, you know, it's being touted as a big match. Bayern obviously still very focused on the Champions League, but if anything, Dortmund can now turn their attention to that cup final. And Kevin Grosskreutz said it. They asked him about it in the post-match interview when all the players were pouring beer over each other and over pretty much everyone in the stadium, including the journalists. But they asked Grosskreutz, and he ended up saying, "No, I'm ready to beat Bayern, and we want to beat them in that final as well." And so really for Borussia Dortmund, Bayern being the villain is very much helping themselves, you know, in terms of their motivation going forward in the Bundesliga. And as you say, that cash injection, will be a huge positive for the Bundesliga, but also Borussia Dortmund, who, as we said, have a few financial constraints, and that will be a huge boost for them.
Yeah, that's right, James. And I want to leave you with a slightly broader question now about the Bundesliga and money, in fact. Of course, Borussia Dortmund still paying off the fact that they only went bankrupt in 2005. I think they've got a lot of debt that's going to mature in 2020, so they have to set some of their earnings aside for that. But it's amazing because they have an 80,000-seat stadium, and yet their match day revenue is less than some Premier League teams like Bolton. And the reason for that is ticket prices at the Westfalenstadion are so low, and the fans actually get angry when you try to charge more than, 10, 15 euros a game. And even, you know, the new TV contract Mina mentioned, oh, it's great, 40 million a season. Well, you know, that's not that much compared to even some of the smaller teams in the Premier League, but even in Serie A. So is there going to have to be some kind of shift for the Bundesliga to compete? Are we going to have to accept higher ticket prices and maybe, you know, a more pervasive television? Or would German fans just not accept that?
I really hope not. And I mean, this has been a clear directive from the Bundesliga for several years now, really, that the fans come first. And for me, it's something that has made the Bundesliga special compared to other leagues in Europe, is the fact that the fans come first. As you say, the ticket prices are fairly low. And I mean, there are debates going on all the time about the fact that there's still standing room, for instance, in the stadiums and whether that should be cut out, because obviously those tickets are even cheaper than the seated ones. And, you know, all these discussions come to a head, and the Bundesliga often rebuttals it with basically saying that's not what we do. We're true to the fans. We want to give them the best experiences. And obviously the concerns recently have come up mainly about security, unfortunately, because there have been a few incidents here and there. But, you know, they trust the fans, and that's something that I find great about the Bundesliga. It's what sets it apart from other leagues at times. And so the money coming in from the TV deal is a great commercial step for them. But if they took it too far, they'd find themselves becoming, you know, the villains in their own backyard, essentially.
James, thanks so much. I've said it before. That was James Thorogood from Bundesliga.com. I've said it before. The Bundesliga, I think, is the most fan-friendly major league in Europe, and I think it's a kind of league that a lot of other leagues, certainly Serie A and La Liga come to mind, but I think also the Premier League could learn a lot from. Mina, we're going to be back after this break when we go Down Under.
Hello and welcome back to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm still Mina Rzouki and I'm still joined by Gabriele Marcotti. Now we move out of Europe and we're on to Australia, where of course it was the final, and Brisbane Roar won against Perth Glory via controversial circumstances.
Not just the final, Mina, the grand final.
Sorry, Gab, sorry. The grand final, which unfortunately didn't end in the best of ways if you are Perth Glory. However, if you're Brisbane Roar, this is 2 titles, consecutive titles in a row. Controversial refereeing in the sense that Brisbane Roar were offered, given a late penalty, which a lot of people have judged not to be a penalty, and it was awarded by the referee of the year, Jared Gillet. So we're here to speak to Neil Sherwin, editor of Backpage Football. Hello, Neil. How are you?
Hi, Mina. Good to speak to you again.
Good speaking to you. Now, you're our resident expert on everything Australia. Was it a penalty?
Well, I was behind the goal where the took place, and immediately the reaction that he missed the ball, and it was simply a fresh air shot. So much so that there was initial jeers until we realised the referee had actually pointed to the penalty spot, and at that stage it was it sparked a near riot in the section around me. So there's a lot of controversy over it in the past day or so. I still don't think it was a penalty. The pitch was poor throughout, and if you look at it closely, the ball took a bobble just before Besher Frusha took a shot, and it caused him to miss the ball, and the referee gave a penalty. And a lot of it was to do with how Berisha acted once he had gone down. He got up immediately looking for a penalty from the referee, and I'm on the referee caved and gave it.
Well, what I wanted to ask you was Brisbane Roar still thought that they deserved to win. A lot of people didn't think that because of over the 90 minutes, because they weren't really able to impose their style of play, and moreover, it seems their key men were rather subdued. Do you think Perth Glory, who a lot of people said played the perfect game, were hard done by on this occasion?
I think before the game, if you asked a Perth Glory supporter would they have been good with winning, they would have said no, because Brisbane are the best side in the competition. They have been for 2 years now. They have gone 36 games unbeaten during that period. So to get into the grand final against a great side is an achievement in itself. Having said that, the manner in which Glory lost, it's really angered a lot of supporters. And as you say, Glory did play a good game. They pressed high up the field. Brisbane like to play with 2 very attacking fullbacks, even though they played with 4 in the back line. To compensate for that, they have Eric Parkley in midfield, who drops feet, takes the ball off the goalkeeper and tries to dictate play. Glory tried to prevent that by using their 2 strikers to sit on the centre halves and on Parkley, and it forced Roar to go long a lot of the time, which is something they don't like to do. And you could see that they were getting a little bit frustrated as the game went on, because Glory didn't have a shot on goal in the entire game. They scored by an own goal and pretty much defended doggedly for the rest of the game. And it was 6 minutes to go when Berisha equalised, so they nearly got the job done.
Neil, this is the second straight year that we've had a very dramatic grand final, a very dramatic ending to the season. How would you assess the A-League in Australian football? I mean, because in those 12 months, a lot has happened, not all of it positive.
It's been a massive 12 months, and it would have been naive to suggest that the grand final would pass off without incident. You know, there had to be something. And even in the aftermath of the game, it emerged that the referee is in a relationship with somebody who works for Brisbane Roar and has been for quite a while. So there's an apparent conflict of interest there. Now, I don't believe that directly influenced the game, but to have the FFA put someone in charge, you know, where a situation could arise and rumours could start is just typical of how they've acted throughout the course of the year. And you know, we spoke the last time I was on about the Gold Coast United situation, and you know, since then we've had another club threaten, you know, to fold, and that's Newcastle Jets, whose owners want to hand back their licence, but have been told by the FFA that they can't because they've entered into a binding contract. So that's set to hit courts soon enough. And we've also had the announcement of the new proposed Western Sydney franchise. So at the moment we're down to 9 teams, maybe 8 if the Newcastle Jets fold, and even that, there's no guarantee that they're going to be around next year. So it's been a topsy-turvy year. It's disappointing because the standard on the pitch has improved and has continued to improve in terms of the good youngsters coming through and the players we're seeing coming back to the league. But this sort of stuff just overshadows it, and it gives the other codes more ammunition to belittle soccer, which is what happens quite a lot here.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your input, Neil. But sadly, that's all we have time for, and I really wanted to ask you more questions about the future of the A-League. But that is all we have time for. We will check back with you, I'm sure, at the start of next season.
Mina, you can always hit Neil up on Twitter.
That's true. We can always. You can always go to Backpage Football or, of course, at Neil Sherwin. But that is all we have time for. But we will be back next week, of course. Me and Gabriele. Did you have fun, Gabriele?
I had a lovely time.
As usual, and as did I. We will see you next week at the same time, the same place, and the same football chat. See you then.
Counter-attacking, but also, attacking players on the pitch, so that when you do counter, you're getting attacking players to defend. And he kind of said, look, this is who we are, this is what we do, deal with it. And
he actually
that worked.
stayed true to his philosophy, basically.
Yeah, I don't know if it's his philosophy, it's a philosophy that he's used this year.
Yes, sure.
But yeah, and that was extraordinarily effective.
You see, my issue with it is that as much as I thought that Real Madrid played a brilliant game, in the sense that I do think they've stuck by what they've been doing this year and thought, we're not going to actually change who we are because it's Barcelona, we're just going to play as we play. What I thought about it is Guardiola nullified the two players that offer a vertical edge to a largely horizontal team. So, when you have Dani Alves starting from an attacking point, then you're missing out on his great runs, to get there, the vertical edge that he adds. With Messi having to go back deep to get the ball, again, what you're making them do is go horizontal, and you have no vertical edge that plays a direct football. And then with Teo out wide, no one in the centre, and on top of it, Teo and Alves, no one is actually, roaming where they needed. Hello and welcome to the World Football Show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm Mina Rzouki and I'm joined by my co-host Gabriele Marcotti. Hello, Gab. How are you?
Hello.
Nice to have you on. And there's so much for us to talk about.
Huge weekend.
Really,
Huge
it was
weekend.
the biggest weekend that I can remember for so long. Everything happened in Italy, everything happened in Spain, of course, the Classico, and Germany. We know who the champions are. But we will get to all that in a bit. We are starting off with, of course, the hottest game of the weekend. Barcelona versus Real Madrid. Now, Gab, I wanted to ask you, because do you think this was the perfect game by Real Madrid, or do you think that Pep Guardiola got his tactics wrong and Barcelona lost that game all by themselves?
Well, I think what struck me is Pep Guardiola has a tendency to overthink. He's always, I just think it's in his personality. He's always kind of looking for, how can my team evolve? We saw it when he added Ibrahimovic. He thought that might give him a different dimension. That didn't work out. We've seen it when he moved to that 3 at the back and putting Mascherano in central defense and playing Cesc as a striker and Messi back in midfield and all these things he's done over time. And we saw it very clearly, I thought, over the 2 legs against AC Milan in the Champions League, where he's trying to react. So he's not the kind of manager, I think, who goes out and says, this is the way we play, you come and worry about us, the way perhaps Arsene Wenger might. And I thought in this one, he completely overthought it. Partly, of course, he was resting players ahead of the Champions League.
Yeah, Chelsea.
But, Real Madrid were there. You win that game, you're 1 point behind, and anything can happen. And I thought he made a series of decisions which, with hindsight, were wrong. Teo, yeah, he can score goals, but if you play Teo, you can't have him sit all the way wide like that. You might as well play Cuenca.
But you don't think that he thought that what they're going to try to do is congest the middle, like every other team that's faced Barcelona is trying to do recently with Milan and Chelsea, and thought, I'm going to have Teo try to stretch them out so that Messi can have a game to go through?
That's fine, but then you don't use Teo for that. You use Cuenca for that if you want to go there.
Teo scores goals.
this is Teo's third ever start in the Liga.
Sorry, I just use my personal.
And it's, you know, it's against Real Madrid.
I understand. It's quite a
you
big
know,
game for
the dropping of Piqué, and we're going to be joined by Tim Stannard later. I want to find out what the deal is. There's just so much speculation of what's going on. To me, it was insane to drop him against Chelsea, and it was insane to drop him in this game. But
he's not concentrated, yeah.
But what's interesting, though, I think, is for a Guardiola who overthinks and tinkers and changes everything, you have a Mourinho who, in the previous 10 encounters, and remember, he's played him 10 times with Real Madrid. He's never beaten him in the 90 minutes. He only had that one win in the Copa del Rey. He's tried everything different every time. He's gone defensive, he's gone attacking, he's gone physical, long ball, keep possession. Nothing's worked. Here, he played what, except maybe Contrao for Arbeloa, was, most would agree, is probably his best 11. He played the style they've been playing most of the year, that sort of 4-2-3-1.
Maybe more of a horizontal edge was at the top.
I think that's a great point that you make. You know, having Dani Alves so high up the pitch to start with makes sense. I think what would have made sense if Marcelo had played on the other end, on the other side, because you're, you know, defending him. Contrao, on the other hand, is, you know, basically the world's most expensive hatchet man. So, you know, I mean, not hatchet man in the sense he's dirty, but like, you know, he is, you know, he's Mr. Hard Hat. You know, he's basically, you know, a blonde Arbeloa, right?
Yes.
So, at that point, you're right. There was no point in having Dani Alves in that role, and also it's true about having people in the box, having a center forward. Once you have, you know, you had situations where Teo was staying so wide. Iniesta in the front three works.
No runners from the midfield.
No runners. In fact, you had the opposite. You had Messi retreating into midfield to get the ball.
Yeah, and just this overflowing midfield, all going horizontally, no one running to get the ball or trying to act or exploit the space that's left behind, with Messi trying to drag all the midfielders away. And you know what I don't understand is that this is a Real Madrid team with, in my opinion, not such a great defense. I mean, they're easily